Good afternoon, race fans, and welcome back to TRTM for today's coverage of the HCCL Multiclass Championship Season 3, Round 6. As always, I'm Regan Clark. You join us here at a prime feature of the Motorsports Vision lineup right here in Norfolk at the Snetterton circuit. Founded in 1951 and in its current configuration, the 300, introduced in 2011, is 12 turns and 2.9 miles of FIA Grade 3. Home to events from the British Touring Car Championship, British GT Championship, British Superbikes Championship and TCR UK. To explore the history of this circuit, we must go, like many British circuits, back to the Second World War, some 80 years ago, where this was a Class A airfield, much like Silverstone, but instead of being loaned out to the RAF, it was loaned out to the United States Army Air Forces from 1943 onwards. It was home to the B-26 Marauder and the B-17 in the prime of the war, but after the Second World War it fell, like many RAF installations, into disrepair, falling back into the hands of local landowner of the area, Fred Riches. Two members of the Aston Martin Owners Club, Dudley Coram and Oliver Sear, would approach Riches later down the line with the idea to build a motor racing circuit on the now abandoned RAF Snetterton Heath. Riches agreed on the conditions no racing take place between 10:45 AM and midday, and that racing ceased before evensong, as Riches, despite being a racing fan, was also a church warden for the local area. Snetterton, of course, has held races for British touring cars, for British GT, Superbikes and TCR, but it also had 4 runnings of a non-championship round of Formula 1 from 1960 to 1963. Innes Ireland, Jack Brabham, Jim Clark and Graham Hill all won at what came to be known as the Lombank Trophy. The last time we ever saw open-wheel races was in the 2023 GB3 season, GB3 being a regional offshoot of the Formula 3 design ethos. Today, however, it's the host of Round 6 of the championship, and as we stay on board here with Tom Wells, things are looking rather hopeful here for the G55. Of course, a car very familiar to Snetterton. The Ginetta GT Championship also comes to this circuit on a routine basis. The G55 used to be its premier vehicle of that single make series. Now it finds itself as one of several aspects of the GT4 field. And looking out from what was an explosive round at round 5 of the championship gave us Ford's second win of the season, this time coming from the hands of Stephen Sutton. The American took his first ever victory this season with a very exuberant fight he had with Dion Helgelien all throughout that race. What really could have been on paper another fight for the win for the Nissan and Mr. Scallops. The Nissan faltered behind it. It was Ford's show to lead up in GT3. Down in GT4, business as usual for Vladislav Mizin. Another win, 2 in a row now after his interrupt from round 3's win by Matthias de Munster. Nonetheless, Mercedes-AMG currently undefeated in GT4 this season. On board at the moment with Tom Wells as we take a look through the championship standings and balance of performance. But before we get to that, with about 16 minutes left to go in free practice, here's a reminder of the current session itinerary. 20 minutes of free practice, of which we're already 4 minutes through. With only 16 minutes left to go before 20 minutes of qualifying. Same structure as before, 10 minutes for the GT3s, I should say, and 10 minutes for the GT4s. Then a 60-minute race to follow with 1 mandatory pit stop for both fuel and tyres. Taking a look at where we find ourselves as well on the calendar, we're halfway through the second half of the championship, 3/4 of the way through, with the last 2 rounds coming up not far from now. We have a week's break before that, and then we'll get on to the Nürburgring 24-hour circuit for round 7, a 90-minute race like we had in Paul Ricard at the season midway, and that's going to be a very exciting penultimate round, bringing us into the final runnings of things at round 8 at the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps on March 7th. Looking into the championship standings then, starting things off up in GT3, Mr. Scallops leads with 123 points. That gap having been brought down by Helgelien and Sutton's advance from 2nd and 3rd. Only 10 points between the leading pair now. Sutton makes 3rd ahead of Valorio after his maiden win at Bathurst. Luca Tamburini makes his way into the top 5 now, ahead of Pascal Stoltz by 11 points, with Alexander Hivrich in 7th place. Giacomo Marianelli falls down to 8th, then 46 points, only 2 points away from 7th, but he's up the road then, 7 points clear of Corey Aiken in 9th place. Rounding out the top 10 then, Stephen Black with 27 points in the GT3s. Down in the GT4s we see here with Tom Wells at the moment. He now makes his way up to 3rd in the championship. Mizin 1st and de Munster in 2nd. Wells now 3rd place with 93 points. He's up the field then, by looking at it there, by about 5 points ahead of Cemak Zulim in 4th place. Asahi Ota in 5th with Aston Martin. Marco Gaioliolo 6th in the championship with 47 points with Alpine. That puts him ahead 5 points clear of Matthew Copsey in 7th place. Gonzalez in in 8th place with 27 points. Castillo in 9th place. And then rounding out the top 10, Roman Zhdanov with Mercedes-AMG with 16 points in the GT4 standings. Whilst we're on the subject of the GT4s, just before we cut away here from the Ginetta, which seems to be right at home here on the Snetterton circuit, let's get a look into the balance of performance for today. Starting things off with the GT4s, then we see that Chevrolet have the best advantage in class here. Anyone using the Camaro will be grinning ear to ear to know the information is following. 40 kilos cut away from the 6th gen Camaro GT4R. Audi losing 17 kilos, McLaren losing 11, so very hopeful signs here for some of the McLaren users, among them Timo de Tosto over from Competizione Performance League. It's going to be exciting to see what he can do today with that 570S. We've seen him to deliver on some solid results over in the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. Mercedes losing only 2 kilos this time around, but that still is going to be more than a sizable advantage here for drivers like Matthias de Munster. So we were told on the run in towards this round that Vladislav Mizin would not be attending round 6. Of course, today being Valentine's Day, you could reasonably make assumptions as to why that is. Aston Martin and Ginetta gain equal stead of 7 kilos apiece there between the Vantage and the G55, and Porsche and Alpine, the normal featherweights of this class, on the real short end of the stick, 22 kilos for the Cayman and the A110. Cutting away then from Tom Wells, we find ourselves with Luca Tamburini onto the discussion of GT3's balance of performance. And taking a look here, Porsche on your screens at the moment find themselves dead level of it all. 5 kilos alongside Lamborghini, caught someplace in the middle here. Taking a look further around, Ferrari's 488, that'll be Anthony Valorio's cars, losing 40 kilos for this round. Lexus losing 25, McLaren losing only 4, Aston Martin gaining 3, Porsche on your screens at the moment gaining 5, so too is the case for Lamborghini. 8 kilos on for Ferrari, 16 for BMW, and 20 for Ford. As we see here then with Luca Tamburini on his way down towards turn 2. We'll get a full rundown of the track in the next 12 minutes before we get on to the topic of qualifying. Once again, no current predictions over what that top 10 is going to look like across both categories. We'll have to just wait and see. Before we get to that point, though, we do have some new drivers on the field here. A driver we saw yesterday over on MSE's penultimate round in Season 3 at the Nürburgring. This is Kristianis Lanieks, Latvian talent in the number 84 Porsche. A spitting image of the one we saw yesterday at the Nürburgring. Now makes its debut here in Season 3 of the Multiclass over in Snetterton. Also see here Marcolin Brustuli in the number 293. A whole new ensemble then of mostly Porsches up in GT3. Of course, we had quite a few new drivers in Bathurst the last round just gone. We also see some returning faces to the field here after a bit of a hiatus. Antonis Kokomelakis back onto the grid with the number 4. So you see at this time a little bit of a wobble for him there, and he gets turned around on his way onto the grass. I believe that there, just to be out of having a look on the track map, that is going to be coming out through, by the looks of it there, that's out through Palmer. So that's at turn 3 for Kokomelakis. See Marco Gagliolo back on the field as well with Alpine. Little A110. Albeit with quite considerable weight added on this time around. Could still find some decent advantage on this track before. I mean, those with apt memory of our coverage of all things HCCL remember when we were last here with the GT4 Challenge. That was a quite sensational qualifying performance by one Alberto Aragoneses and the 104 Alpine. So now taking up the slack of that into the Multiclass Championship could very well be Gagliolo in the number 30. He's on his way down through turn 2 at Montreal. So taking a look at the session thus far, let's get a look into the current timing of things with Giacomo Marianelli currently fastest in the session ahead of Dion Helgalian in second. We see though Helgalian down to the line here. And now up to the fastest time by 23 thousandths, up and ahead of the number 51 Ferrari. Meanwhile, last round's race winner in GT3, Stephen Sutton, 3rd place in the session thus far. Marcolin Brustuli, new driver on the field, 4th fastest in the session and ahead of Luca Tamburini in 5th. Recent introductions there into 4th place, rejoining the session after what looked to have been a disconnect, is Mr. Scallops with Nissan. Meanwhile, in the GT4s, we see that Przemek Zulin with Aston Martin looking particularly strong indeed in the early doors of this session thus far. Tom Wells currently Division 2nd, overall 8th, and Timo de Tosto currently Division 3rd, only off of Wells by a couple tenths of a second. So it's an all-British ensemble for manufacturers in the top 3 there between Zulin's Aston Martin, Wells's Ginetta, and de Tosto's McLaren. Currently, Mercedes then, in the absence of what we're currently led to believe is a lack of the number 2 of Mizin. It leaves the current competitor for the GT4 lead, Matthias de Munster, with the best opportunity at the moment to clear a gap up towards the penultimate round of the championship and potentially to get as close as possible to his rival Vladislav Mizin. At the moment, only making up the 4th fastest time in division and 11th fastest overall, Mercedes, in spite of their 2 kilo reduction, seem to be struggling to find any solid ground up and ahead of Ginetta, Aston Martin or McLaren. So we'll go to catch on board with, I believe we're about to see down towards the line here, the number 41. So let's get on board with Anthony Valorio to get a tour of the track here in Snetterton. Down the centre straight we go then. On board with Valorio. And of course, every corner has a meaning behind its name. Of course, down through Richards, named after Fred Richards. Of course, we were just on the centre straight. Of course, named after 4-time champion Ayrton Senna. Down towards Montreal then. This was also recently renamed to Wilson, after Justin Wilson. Originally it was called Montreal, named after the circuit Gilles Villeneuve. In through to turn 3 then at Palmer, named after Jonathan Palmer. In towards Agostini, named after Giacomo Agostini. A little bit of a wobble there for Anthony Valorio. Bit of dirt over the right-hand side, but on the exit there with Agostini we go. In towards Hamilton, of course named after Sir Lewis Hamilton. Into Oggies, named after Peter Ogden. Up and around. Into Williams, then named after Frank Williams. It's a very muddled opening sector as well. I think it's what gives such a love-hate relationship for those of the Snetterton 300 configuration over what is the shorter 200. We're down the Bentley straight, of course, named after Bentley Motors. Into Brundle, named after Martin Brundle. And then Nelson, named after Lord Horatio Nelson. Round the bomb hole corner. And that was named after an elevation change in the track surface, I believe due to unexploded World War II ordnance. So down through Coram, named after Dudley Coram, through Murray's, named after Murray Walker. Down towards the line then with Anthony Valorio. Track with a lot of history there. Down towards the line goes Valorio. 4th fastest after that last lap, so bringing some justice back to Ferrari. Of course, currently holds in the line from 2nd has been Giacomo Marianelli, but taking a look now, it makes a Ferrari 1 and 4. We also see Lorenzo Bucossi, currently 5th fastest in the session, only off of Valorio by about 100th there. Valorio just advancing north of the back of that top 5, 32, now 5th place. Ferrari once again looking strong here. It is quite the surprise to see. And this trails on what has been back-to-back strong performances for Ferrari in the last couple of days here. Of course, we saw over at the Nürburgring in the qualifying run for MSC Season 3, Round 3. It was looking incredibly strong for Ferrari there as well. Ultimately thwarted, though, by McLaren in that race. We'll see whether or not that comes to be the case at the moment, as Ferrari again plays second fiddle to one of their oldest arch rivals, that being the Ford Motor Company, currently up over the front, being Dion Helge-Leon's time on 1:47.057. But we see there, new driver on the field, Marcelin Brustulli, now fastest with Porsche of all manufacturers. The number 293, 1:46.765, the new fastest time of the session thus far. Question therein remains for Brustulli. New driver on the field, expectations at a baseline here. There's nothing too high, nothing too low. What can we come to expect of this driver today? Is already quite the sensational time in the midst of free practice. Now, we must consider as well, we've yet to see the grid firing on all cylinders here. We're not into the qualifying session just yet, and moreover, both grids will have half the time they've had so far to work with an available flying lap time. 10 minutes for the GT3s, 10 minutes for the GT4s. With about 4 minutes, just shy of 5 left to go, we find ourselves with 3 of the most legendary sports car manufacturers of the last 100 years go head-to-head here in Snetterton. Porsche versus Ford versus Ferrari. You see down towards the line there, Anthony Valorio. having been forced back down to 5th, but still ahead of Bukossi by a single hundredth of a second between the 488 and the 296, the number 41 and the number 32. Meanwhile, just getting a look back into the current scope of things in GT4's free practice. Julim still fastest, Wells second, and De Tosto in third. So still British manufacturers comprising the top 3, and then Mercedes from 4th, 5th and 6th there. Dennis Gonzalez, Matthias de Munster and Felix Kobler. Marco Gagliolo behind them, then Oliver Swaber. 3 times as yet unset, Stephen Black, Antonis Kokimalakis, and Armando Davoli. Davoli, even, I should say. You see there, just cutting up in front of the 2 Mercedes GT4s, that being Gonzalez and De Munster at this time. You can see as well for the Mercedes cars, very, very close to one another at this time. 395 to 942. So we're talking in and around the ballpark there, just shy of 0.6 of a second, then even closer when you consider up in front of them between Gonzalez and De Tosto up onto that top 3. We can see there closer gap of about 300 and looking at it there, 310 thousandths of a second. So down to the line, across the line goes both Gonzalez and De Munster, neither of them advancing position. We see there for Armando Davoli, now 10th place with Lamborghini, out past Tamburini and Laniax as we come towards the end of free practice so far. We also see joining the session there, just double checking my notes because I do of course know of a driver that goes by the same name, just making sure that we're getting this right the first time around. If my memory does serve me correctly, that is Radoslav Kowalczyk, a driver we've not seen here on TRTN since the NLRL Solo Multiclass Endurance Championship. So curious to see the 991 back on the field. Of course, he was a pretty solid talent in his day. We'll see what he can do this time around in HCCL. He makes a growing number of Porsches on this field. Still currently leading then is Marcelin Brostuli in the number 293. As it stands, though, we have, just taking a quick count of heads here, that's about 5 Porsches on this grid so far. The 991 being the newest among them, that being Radoslav Kowalczyk. We also see here the 293, Marcelin Brostuli, down to the line. Sadly, no advance there over his personal best, but still holds the fastest time of free practice, 1:46.765. Of course, we also have the number 4 of Antonis Korkimelakis, the number 84 of Christianis Laniax, and the number 813 of Luca Tamburini. A curious case here. Brostuli fastest. The question is, can the Canadian talent replicate some of that magic into a much shorter stead of qualifying? Or could it be the case where Giacomo Marianelli, or for that matter as well, Dion Helgelian, could have a chance here of a fight towards pole position? Now, it's worth pointing out, if Helgelian can make his way to the front row, he has got a very easy run of things on the race start. The Porsche, yes, it's a pretty decent car for acceleration, but it doesn't hold much a candle over to the Mustang. It's going to be a game of reactions here between those two to see who comes out on top down through turn 1 through that of Riches. We still see some motion there from the pit lane heading back out. Dennis Gonzalez. We also see joining us here the number, just having a look there, the number 28. So that's Cobbler back in the pit lane. Had a bit of a spotty time over in Bathurst last week. There's definitely a lot of mystique here then in this new driver. Number 293 on debut, I should mind as well. Marcelin Brostuli, fastest in the session thus far. Of course, we'll see how far does that carry into qualifying. It's been otherwise incredible stuff so far from the Porsche. He really hasn't put a foot wrong there. He's been pushing the car right onto the ragged edge, and it's been able to take pretty much every ounce of punishment it's been dished out so far. But I think he's hit somewhat of a glass ceiling there towards the end of free practice. Couldn't advance north of a 1:46.765. Nonetheless, still holds on to the fastest lap in GT3 in free practice. We'll see how that fares over the course of qualifying, but I'd say we've definitely got a likelihood here of the 293 taking pole position in GT3. Now, of course, there are plenty of drivers to consider, namely in that top 5 alongside, and then Helgelian, Marianelli, Sutton and Scallops. I'd also say it's worth a shout there for Velorio with the best balance of performance for GT3. Across the line a moment ago, Antonis Korkimelakis into the top 10, pushes Armando Davoli down to 11th. Porsche make now looking at it here, 4 of the top 10 positions at the end of free practice. With the 991 coming to the line, that could be 50%. As we see here, Radoslav Kowalczyk to the line. Sadly, doesn't put a time on the charts this time around. Not far then from the discussion of 20 minutes of qualifying. That will be split down the middle. The first 10 going over to the GT3s, the last 10 going over to the GT4s. Last to the line then, so it appears, looks to be, or looked to have been, in a confusing spectacle there. I believe we were expecting a car down to the line, but I think now they've gone back into the pit lane. So a pity there. We see Gonzalez down to the line with Mercedes. Not far then from the current start of qualifying. Back into the pit lane goes Gonzalez. At the end of the session, 4th fastest in division, 15th outright. You can see of the cars barreling down towards the line is the leading 293, currently tucked in behind. Trying to get a look here on the cameras. That appears to be, yes, that's Marco Gagliolo with Alpine. One rear engine car meets another on their way down towards the checkered line at the end of free practice. 1:46.765 to beat, and it stays the fastest time at the end of free practice. So then, a curious case indeed as we get on to the topic of qualifying. So, 20 minutes of qualifying underway. Of course, the first 10 minutes allotted over to the GT3s. They're already on their way out. We can see up the road there. First among the frame, Mr. Scallops right behind him. Last round's race winner in GT3, Stephen Sutton in the number 7 Mustang. Recently having advanced then up to 3rd in the championship, Sutton makes the podium positions thus far. With only a few rounds left to go, it's still Mr. Scallops leading that charge up in GT3. But after a bit of a mixed bag performance over in Bathurst, a result that he wouldn't be particularly pleased with considering his clean record thus far for race wins after round 1. To see any kind of upset in that represents a little bit of a shake in the balance. Hopefully it's back to business then for the number 394 when we get into qualifying today then. On the outlaps at the moment, then leading that charge, Mr. Scallops. Current timing order, unless anything changes before that, if we're going on to the flying laps not far from now, will be for that top 5. Mr. Scallops, Stephen Sutton, Giacomo Marianelli, Anthony Valorio, and Luca Tamburini. 2 Ferraris, a Ford, a Nissan, and a Porsche. So we'll be staying on board then with the Nissan to be the first of our flying laps today. A driver with a lot of experience in this championship, of course. Bear in mind, defending GT3 champion, the very same Nissan you see on your screens at the moment. With that, carries a lot of pedigree onto this grid. And he's led the championship confidently so far. But in more recent weeks, things have started to get a little bit shaky when we take a look back into those standings. Now, I'm just going to look into them myself here. Sadly, we won't be able to bring that up on screen. But after that last round, when we had this climactic fight between Helge and Sutton, it still came to be the case that Helge was outscoring that of Mr. Scallops. That points tally at the moment comes down to only 10 between these two. Bear in mind, with today's round and then 2 more thereafter, it does present a possible challenge to the reclamation of the throne in this championship. Up in GT3, things could absolutely get lively in the next 3 rounds starting from now. With the next 2 rounds, we must consider as well coming up over at the Nürburgring and Spa, 2 circuits that a lot of these drivers will have quite decent knowledge of compared to Snetterton. We could definitely see some of the most engaged racing of the season since Bathurst. So on board at this time then with Mr. Scallops. His way through Oggies in towards Williams. Fine precision there from the Nissan. We're seeing in that middle sector. He's taking quite ample space of the track. He's not pushing the car too hard. It really does seem to be gliding through this area of the track, not losing too much time out. Up through Brundle into Nelson. Out through turn 10 we go then. Into Coram. And into Murray's. So then, Mr. Scallops to be the benchmark time for the GT3 qualifying. 6 minutes left to go then for the GT3, so time is money today. Scallops then fastest, then, well, temporarily fastest. Now fastest is Stephen Sutton. Coming down towards the line, Giacomo Marianelli in the number 51. Third fastest there. Then from behind them, we see Anthony Valorio has gone second fastest, but we can't seem to locate him at this time. Trying to get back on board with the 41. It's a confusing spectacle, but Dion Helgelian in the meantime goes fastest. Marcelin Brustulli, third fastest by half a second off of Dion Helgelian. This makes a curious case here. Of course, the 293 was fastest in free practice, but when pen meets paper, evidently that first flying lap left much to be desired for the Canadian talent. Normally a front runner based off of the free practice results thus far, but with half the time to play with and even half the time now therein, with only 5.5 minutes before the end of the GT3 tenure of qualifying, Brustulli third behind both Fords, Sutton and Helgelian. Meanwhile then, coming down towards the line, we'll go to catch on board with the 991, Radoslav Kowalczyk with Porsche. On the way out through Murray's. Down towards the line we go then with the Porsche. Bear in mind, quite a few times left to put on the charts here. Kowalczyk to the line, 7th ahead of Kokemelakis. Still waiting to see then times from Stephen Black, Christianis Lanieks, Lorenzo Bucossi and Luca Tamburini. But we're seeing here with Stephen Black on his way down through to the line here. Following on his trails is Christianis Lanieks. And by looks of it there from behind them, the 394 of Mr. Scallops. So Stephen Black to the line. Sadly, couldn't put a time on the charts. Therefore, Christianis Lanieks, they're up to the current scope of 7th place. Meanwhile, we see Mr. Scallops up to 2nd. We see Stephen Sutton down towards the line. Bear in mind, those two separate by 0.003 of a second is quite the remarkable statistic. Meanwhile, Anthony Valorio fastest by a single tenth over Dion Helgelian. 293 coming to the line. Brustulli from 5th. Where does he go now? It's fastest by 197 thousandths. Marcelin Brustulli back up to the fastest time. 4 minutes to spare in this qualifying session. Before we get to the release of the GT4s and the GT3s have to come back in, Valorio from Brustulli on the front row. Curious case indeed. Meanwhile, behind them, Helgelian 3rd, Scallops 4th, Sutton 5th, Bucossi 6th, Marianelli 7th, Lanieks 8th, Kowalczyk 9th. And that is now 10th for Kowalczyk as Kokemelakis is back up to 9th place. Davoli in 11th. Still yet to see times from either Tamburini or Black. We see Black is out on track at this time, but Tamburini is in the pit lane. So has he got the time here? He does drop off the jacks. Is the 813 liable to come out of the pit lane? He's back up onto the jacks, so clearly something wasn't 100% there in the setup. Down to the line comes Radoslav Kowalczyk. Bear in mind, a whole wad of Porsches here at the back of the top 10. Does he advance up past his fellow Porsches? Not this time around. Kokemelakis stays in 9th. Lanieks stays in 8th. Nearest to the line, the 394. Mr. Scallops has seen ups and downs of the podium thus far. Currently just outside of it by about half a second. Or just shy of actually half a second. And we see from behind the 7 of Sutton coming to the line. Bear in mind, it's only 3 thousandths between the pair to decide 4th place. Down to the line goes Sutton. Couldn't find any advance over it. We see Christianis Lanieks across the line there from 8th, stays 8th. A whole lot of times coming in from behind there, the 41 and the 45. Helgelian fastest by 23 thousandths now, if we can get the words out, over Brustulli. Speaking of Brustulli, not far from the line there. Actually just crossed the line a moment ago. Couldn't find an advance up over that 23 thousandth of a second margin. Slides out through Riches with 2 minutes left to go. And now we see up the inside, giving him grief there, Giacomo Marianelli in the 51. They're not even in the race yet. These two going head-to-head down at Montreal. In towards Palmer. We see there, Brustulli's getting his elbows out. He is infuriated with Marianelli, getting the leg up on him in through Sector 1. The 51, not adamant to play second fiddle here. He's not looking to stay behind the 293 the entirety of qualifying. He wants to get the clean air for himself. And that's what he's done thus far. Now, it was close, very close to an incident between these two, and I'm surprised to see that it has not become an incident. later down the line. Of course, Brostoli's not going to be happy because this is actively sabotaging his chances of pole position, being stuck in behind Marinelli at this time. Now, it could play into his hands on the off chance here that he can get up and around the Ferrari onto the Bentley straight. But with the Ferrari having ever so slightly more top ends over the Porsche, the chances therein remain rather slim at this time. A minute left to go in the GT3 qualifying. So for these two, they'll still have one more flying lap to serve. At this time then, Marinelli's main priority is to make about 0.8 of a second to get up past Lorenzo Bucossi in 6th place to try and be up towards that 3rd row of the grid. But there is definitely something to be said of that front row right now. Dion Helgilian hunting down his 2nd race win since Barcelona at the season opener. And then new challenger to the field, Marcelin Brostoli, 2nd fastest in the session. After some grief there from Marinelli, we can see Brostoli has broke away out through Coram to give himself the space. Meanwhile, Marinelli up to 5th, now ahead of Sutton into the top 5. Brostoli onto one more flying lap. We are but seconds away from the release of the GT4s, and we see here preparing to go. Actually, at the very end of the pit lane there is Gonzalez in the number 14. 6 seconds to launch then. Dennis Gonzalez not waiting any longer to get out onto the field. And away he goes, I assume now, as we see there peeling out of the pit lane from behind him is Timo de Tosto in the number 58 McLaren. Was in the top 3 in free practice in the GT4s. Let's see what he can do today. We'll catch on with the WOD of the GT4s in just a moment's time. We do have a few more GT3s just finishing up here in qualifying. We see on his final lap, Radoslav Kowalczyk, 9th on the field at the moment, sandwiched between 2 other Porsches. Christianis Lanieks up over his nose, Antonis Korkamelakis over his tail. Down to the line, the 991 from 9th on the field. Comes back into the pit lane, finishes this session off in the top 10. 9th place at this time then for his first qualifying of the season. The 813 coming to the line. So Luca Tamburini looking to make this the 13th time on the charts here. And whereabouts does this new timing fall in? Just behind the other Porsches to 11th there. A huge sum of Porsches at the back of the field. The 394 comes into the pit lane. Mr. Scallop satisfied with a 2nd row start. He's got a competitive ground to play for. Starts in the trailing wins there of the 293 of Marcelin Brostoli. Number 51 nearest to the line. That's Giacomo Marinelli. Made sizable advance in the last couple of laps here. The 51 though peels back into the pit lane, satisfied with what he's been able to do so far. His target was Bucossi and has massively overshot there into the top 5, overachieving as always then Giacomo Marinelli into the top 5 at the end of qualifying today. We saw a little bit of connection trouble here for the 813. We can see a bit of trouble for Luca Tamburini. 998 nearest to the line, but so it does appear for Armando Davoli. As, oh, hang on a tick. We may very well have an issue here, folks. Do just give us one moment. We are encountering some rather severe technical difficulties regarding server stability. We are currently investigating the issue, and hopefully a statement will be issued by Race Control in the coming minutes. Please do bear with. So presently we will be re-attempting the qualifying session. This whole area of the broadcast will be annexed from the release to YouTube. If it is a case where the stability is still beyond reparable, we will just have to unfortunately cancel the event and move it to next Saturday on the 21st. Full statement to be released if that comes to be the case. For those of you tuning in live at the moment, this will not make its way through to the release if the event is to be a success. So do bear with. Well, after some technical troubles, we're back into the broadcast here, back into the scope of qualifying. Of course, the same current structure applies. 10 minutes for the GT3s, then 10 for the GT4s. You see, making their way out of the pits then for the first time, Stephen Sutton, followed by, in the background there, we saw was Dion Helgelian following on their trails. You can see Giacomo Marianelli as well as Mr. Scallops further down the line. Christianis Laniax also joining us from the exit of the pit lane. 19.5 minutes left to go in the session then. We see the number 45 currently being chased down the line there towards turn 2 at Montreal, while the number 51 gets up and around them. Same story for the number 394 on their way in towards turn 2. Let's go and catch on board, though, with the one leading the charge then, number 7, Stephen Sutton. He had a statement issued from race control due to server stability issues. If we are to experience any further issues now, the event will be postponed to the 21st. On the grounds that you're still seeing this broadcast would indicate that that didn't happen. Well, nonetheless, out through Williams. On board then with Stephen Sutton, set to be the new benchmark time for GT3's qualifying then. We'll catch on board with him for the course of the upcoming first flying lap of the session. Of course, last round's race winner won in Bathurst after a climactic final lap and a fantastic race-long fight with Dion Helgelian. The two Mustangs went head-to-head in the Land Down Under for round 5's race win. Round Coram we go then, in towards Murray's. So then, down across the line we go to start the first of our flying laps. On board with Stephen Sutton down through the Riches, then long sweeping right-hander to bring us through the run of the opening sector in towards turn 2. Heavy braking zone here down at Montreal. Round we go, very sharp hairpin right. And on the run down towards turn 3 at Palmer we go. Long sweeping left-hander. So really quite an onslaught of corner types here, as we'll find corners of all shapes and sizes. Open hairpin left coming up now at Agostini, turn 4. And a sharp left-hander coming up here at Hamilton. So far, so good, though, for Stephen Sutton in towards Oggies. Sharp, parabolic right-hander into a long, sweeping medium right at Williams. Out through to the Bentley straight we go, then. Into a very bizarre section of the track we catch on board here. This is in through Brundle and Nelson, so it's a curved braking zone. A shallow left, but you're on the brakes throughout as it slows down into a very sharp, almost square right at Nelson. Then through turn 10 as it dips on the inside. Then through to a long sweeping right-hander here at Corams. That's juxtaposed by a very sharp square left coming up here at Murray's. Shows up very quickly there, easy to get caught out. Back onto the centre straight. Stephen Sutton then, the first time in qualifying for the GT3s as he passes up there Antonis Korkamilakis down toward the line. The number 7 first onto the timing charts after a great first flying lap. It's a 1:47.850 by Sutton. Next to the line, the 394, Mr. Scallops with Nissan. Heading in towards the line here. Let's see what the Nissan can do on its first flying lap. Then from behind them, the 45 of Helgelian. Second fastest for Scallops. Then for Helgelian across the line. That's the new fastest time, 1:47.197. Then Christianis Laniax, the number 84, to the line for fourth fastest. From behind them, we see approaching the line there, the Lamborghini of Armando Davoli. Sadly didn't put any times on the charts there. Lorenzo Bucossi, fifth fastest, now down to 6th with the introduction of Anthony Velorio up to 2nd. 293 coming to the line. So we're about to see here Marcelin Brostuli with Porsche across the line onto a flying lap he goes. Same story by looks of it here for Giacomo Marianelli. That seemed to have been either an invalidated lap or we're about to see one onto the charts here. For Marianelli across the line seemed to have been the former as opposed to the latter. Nearest to the line, what looked to have been invalidated out through Murray's there, Luca Tamburini, as his icon just went light blue. That indicated that the track limits were breached by the 813, and that does appear to be the case. Onto another flying lap goes the 813 Porsche. Bear in mind, only 5 minutes left to go of the GT3 sprint of qualifying. Then we get to the release of the GT4s onto the field. Nearest to the line then, Radoslav Kowalczyk back on board now with the 991 on his way in towards Murray's, out of Coram. Seventh fastest there for Kowalczyk across the line. Number 7 approaching the line once again, Stephen Sutton. Started the session off on a high there, pushed down to 3rd, however, not too far away from Valorio to make it a Ford 1-2. Down across the line he goes, and it is to a Ford 1-2 at this time, as he goes 2 tenths off the mark there to the fastest time. From behind him was the number 4, then the 394 to the line. Mr. Scallops from 4th on the field, now 3rd. From behind him, Helge Leon. Does he extend into a 46? Yes, he does. 146.850. Nearest to the line, Laniax in the 84. Then the 41 of Valorio. Laniax stays 5th. Valorio to the line from 4th. Recently pushed out of 3rd there. Back up to 3rd. Now ahead of Scallops by 0.03 of a second. Davoli to the line from behind. Number 998, 8th fastest now. Number 32, I should say. That being Lorenzo Bucossi, 6th fastest. Nearest to the line from behind him, the 293, Brustuli. Across the line again, couldn't put a time on the charts. Is that the case for Marianelli? Across the line goes Marianelli, same story. 3.5 minutes left to go then of the GT3 cut of qualifying, and things are looking rather precarious for quite a few on the field, including Marianelli and Brustulli, but also here we see with Tamburini appeared light blue on the radar. Does that mean no more times this time around for Tamburini? Yes, that's the case. Across the line he goes once again, still without a time on the charts. 991 nearest. Back on board with Radoslav Kowalczyk. In towards Murray's we go. Down to the line then goes Kowalczyk. From 7th on the field, stays 7th after that last lap. Number 7 coming to the line, Stephen Sutton still clashing with Dion Helge Leon for the fastest time of this event so far. From behind them, the 394 nearest to the line after Sutton. Sutton stays 2nd. Then we see the 394 on the exit of Murray's, trailing him there. The 45 still the fastest in the session, being Helge Leon. We're watching here with Mr. Scallops down to the line in the 394, and he's up to 2nd fastest by 115 thousandths. That extends up to 275 thousandths. New fastest time, 146.690. 84 nearest to the line. Christianis Laniax from 5th. Makes an improvement, but not enough for 4th. We see for the 41 down to the line. Can he make his way back to the podium? He can and absolutely will. Up to the fastest time by 35 thousandths. Nearest to the line then, Bucossi. Then Brustuli. Bucossi 6th. Brustuli to the line here. Bear in mind, high hopes for him to take pole position. Is it better late than never? Yes, absolutely, by 600ths over Valorio. Over that front row, the 51 across the line a moment ago. Onto another flying lap, Giacomo Marianelli. Bear in mind, 1.5 minutes before the release of the GT4s. Across the line a moment ago went the 707. Stephen Black onto another run of flying laps. Same story applies there for the 813 of Luca Tamburini. Right now, things hotting up on the top 3. Marcelin Brustuli, Anthony Valorio and Dion Helge Leon. Moreover, looking out towards that top 5, Mr. Scallops and Stephen Sutton. All 5 of these drivers separate front to back by less than a second. We see though Sutton onto the grass. Is that the end of his times here in qualifying? So it does appear. With 1 minute left to go, we are beyond the point of no return for the majority of these drivers. Into the pits then, Stephen Sutton settles for 5th on the field. Starts alongside Christianis Laniax on the 3rd row of today's grid. Nearest to the line then, Mr. Scallops out through Murray's. 45 from behind him. Dion Helge Leon less than a 10th from the fastest lap. Same story for Anthony Valorio. Helge Leon to the line, up to fastest by 135 thousandths. The number 4 from behind, that being Korkimelakis. Onto the timing chart, so it appears they're 8th fastest. Coming to the line, the number 41, Anthony Valorio. Bear in mind, only 600ths away from second. Couldn't find it in that last lap. Has one more opportunity to do so as he crosses over to the last of his flying laps in this session. Bear in mind, 135 thousandths away from pole position. Appears to be Marcolin Brostuli on his way to the line here. He might very well just beat the clocks for one more time. And across the line he goes, 195 thousandths clear of Dion Helgelien. Marcolin Brostuli back to the fastest time on his first ever appearance onto this grid. 813 nearest to the line as the GT4s are released. We see a whole pack of cars released onto the track. Leading the charge for them at this time is Matthias de Munster. From behind him is Dennis Gonzalez and Tom Wells. Then we saw as well, just further down the line from them, the 58 of Timo de Tosto. Meanwhile, at the end of their last flying lap, Luca Tamburini squeezes into the top 10 in the 813. Starts on the 5th row alongside Antonis Korkamilakis onto the grass at this time. That's the end of his run of qualifying. We do see, though, passing him up there onto the Bentley straight, still with one more card left to play here, is Anthony Valorio. Bear in mind, also out on track at this time is Sutton, having been let past there through turn 10 into turn 11 at Coram by Mr. Scallops. Can the 45 strike back at a chance of the fastest lap? Bear in mind, with the 293 still out on track, having beat the clock by seconds to put a new fastest lap onto the charts. Helgelien, what's the response by Ford? To the line he goes. Sadly, by looks of it there, not enough this time around for pole. Helgelien, though, still very close to his chances. We mentioned this before. If Ford can be alongside Porsche for the race start, they still hold advantage on acceleration. So we'll see. Is there a new fastest lap to be expected? Could we scrape into the very high 145s by the end of this session? Courtesy of Marcolin Brostuli, the 293, down through to Murray's. Bear in mind, we'll be catching on board with the GT4s in just a moment's time here, seeing the very fleeting end of the GT3 grid. Finish up activities here into the pit lane, satisfied with what he's done so far. The fastest lap of the session for the GT3s, 146.265. On board then with the 69. Across the line then, Matthias de Munster, the first of our flying laps here, begins in the GT4 qualifying. A little bit of an abrupt start, all things considered. Had a few technical troubles getting in towards today's GT4 qualifying, so seeing down towards turn 2. Current timing order as it stands then: de Munster, Gonzalez, Wells, De Tosto, and then Gagliolo, and then Swaver at this time. Also starting their flying laps just a little further down from the rest of the field, the 91 of Jean-Marc Julim. So out through Williams, on board here with Matthias de Munster, trailing from behind him there. You see the number 14 of Gonzalez. Two Mercedes cars expected to be up towards the front of GT4's field today in the absence of the number 2 of Vladislav Mizin, the current GT4 Championship lead. Runner-up of the GT4 Challenge earlier on HCCL. Out through to turn 10 then. Through to Coram we go, the number 69. So benchmark time arriving here from the 69 will be provisionally fastest. We'll see how the rest of the grid stacks up around him. Across the line goes Matthias de Munster. From behind him, Gonzalez. Now up to the fastest time of the GT4s then. We see to the line Tom Wells with Ginetta. Goes only behind the two Mercedes cars at this time. Timo de Tosto across the line from behind both of them. Does not put a time on the charts just now. See the number 30. We just missed them there trying to catch on board with Marco Gagliolo, but they're 4th fastest in the session at this time. When you consider the GT4s currently 1st through to 3rd separate by less than 0.3 of a second. New fastest time, though, comes from Aston Martin. Jean-Marc Julim, now fastest in the session in the number 91. something just to note as well, and it's a bit of a curious case. We did see, as a matter of fact, Armando Davoli currently out on track. Very curious there as to how he was out for that long. And I think he has just been called back into the pits there by race control, so someone's in trouble, evidently. New fastest time then for the GT4s by Julim. Then Gonzalez, then De Munster, then Wells, then Gagliolo for the top 5 at the moment. Still yet to see any times from De Tosto, Sueva or Kobler, for that matter. Nearest to the line then, the number 28 at this time. That'll be Felix Kobler on his way through to... looking here out through Nelson. Through turn 10 in towards Coram. Bit of some upset there on the dip through turn 10. Down towards the line then, Felix Kobler. From behind him as well, we see, heading to the line, Matthias de Munster. Could it be back up to the fastest of GT4? Across the line goes de Munster. Couldn't find any ground of it. Does Gonzalez find any ground up over Julim? No, but tell you what, who does? It's Tom Wells, the Ginetta. Faster than the Aston by nearly, looking at it there, nearly a full 3/10 of a second. We're looking there in the ballpark of 240 thousandths, to be exact. 2/10 400ths. Between Ginetta and Aston Martin up over the front of the field. We see, though, the rebuttal about to arrive here from the 91. Does Przemak Julim go fastest once again? 3.5 minutes left to go in qualifying. Outright across the line, then goes the Aston. Couldn't find any ground over it. So nearest to the line at this time is, so it stands... And this does stand as a bit of a confusing spectacle because do have... what? Is he lost a little bit there? That is Christianis Laniacs. This is a bit of a confusing one then. I must say it's a bit of a bizarre package for the Porsche 718 Cayman. Does look suspiciously like a 992. Don't really know too much about what they've been doing so lately with the 718 Cayman. Very weird looking GT4, I should mind. Maybe Laniacs has not read the rule book because that is not his position to be out in. On board then with De Munster. I've seen some fluctuations in server numbers, and that's been disconnects from Radoslav Kowalczyk. Currently 10th on the field up in GT3. You see here from Matthias de Munster down towards the line. Tom Wells still leads in GT4. Down to the line then goes de Munster, still in the top 4, but most recently there advanced up to 3rd. Wells across the line then still holds on to the fastest time thus far. Timo de Tosto now 3rd fastest, pushes de Munster back down to the back of the 2nd row. Moreover, pushes Gonzalez to the back of the top 5 in GT4. Minute and 40 seconds left to go. Julim not far from the line. Gagliolo makes 6th in the session ahead of Kobler. You see here comes the Aston Martin of Przemak Julim. Sadly doesn't find any ground in that last lap over the Ginetta. Still stifled at 240 thousandths in between the leading pair of GT4 so far. So then let's go and catch back on board with some of the leading GT4s nearest to the line. So we're back on board here with Matthias de Munster. This is on the exit of Williams onto the Bentley straight, on board with the AMG. We have reports of technical failure for the number 119. That's for Oliver Sueva, reporting brake failure on his 570S. That may lead to early withdrawal then from round 6 for McLaren. For at least one of their 570Ss. That still leaves the 58 available to race today, that being Timo de Tosto. Down through then to Murray's. Still on board with de Munster. Looking onto the telemetry, just a scope of it here, so close to an improvement. You can see the telemetry going haywire to try and calculate, will there be an improvement, will there be detriment? It seems to be the latter this time around. Across the line from behind him there, now goes up and ahead of him. That's Dennis Gonzalez in the number 14, just beaten by the bell for the majority of the grid there. But for these two, they get one more available flying lap. Meanwhile, Timo de Tosto moves up to second. Tom Wells stays fastest. De Tosto, we see there, now up to second ahead of Zulim. Zulim down towards Coram at this time, so he's got an option here to potentially pursue that front row. Bear in mind, it's really not too far a leap in logic to go from one to the other here. If you look just up ahead, these two separated by, at the current time, 58 thousandths between Wells and De Tosto. Down towards the line then, Zulim. Can he find either of them? Yes, he can. Pole position for GT4. Aston Martin up at the fastest. As you can see, they're separate by looking at it there. And that's 88 thousandths thereabouts. Or actually might be 92 thousandths of a second between Zulim and Wells at the very end of qualifying today. That still leaves two cars out on track for the GT4s. And at that time, it's currently Gonzalez v De Munster. The two Mercedes cars now clashing for what represents the last of row 2 of the GT4 field. So then down towards the line goes the 69 and the 14, but into the pit lane goes De Munster. That leaves Gonzalez to potentially clash with De Tosto for the last of those podium positions. We'll see the Mercedes down to the line he goes, and by looks of it there, stays 4th in division at the very end of qualifying. Sadly, with no articles of news to discuss at this time, save for ongoing progress in Rally Sweden and also in the 12 hours of Bathurst. Not an awful lot we have of breaking news at this time. I think the majority of our focus has just been shifted on making sure the event gets underway with the issues the server has had in the last couple of hours. So we'll get a look at the full grid in just a moment's time. Just to note as well, at the end of GT4, half a second between the top 5. So almost mirroring the best parallels of GT3. That ended up expanding out to just be only 4 cars within a second of one another, and the top 3 divided by less than half a second. That is quite impressive though, right at the very end of qualifying there. The 91, the 12, the 58, the 14 and the 69 all within half a second of one another there. To be precise, that's within about 550 thousandths, and also half a second and then half a tenth of a second on top of that. We'll get a full look at the grid in just a moment's time. Some of the major talks of it though. Zulim on pole, of course, for GT4. Could give Aston Martin their first win of the season in GT4. Also going toe-to-toe with Wells. So battle of the British manufacturers over the front row. That's not to take out of the equation Timo de Tosto starting right behind them. Also up in GT3 then. Marcelin Broscioli against Dion Helgalian from the front row. Valorio and Scallops right behind them. Marianelli and Sutton on the third row to make an ultra-competitive top 3 rows. So then, 2 minutes before the formation lap, and let's get a look at the grid good and proper. Taking a look then, Marcelin Broscioli on debut to this series on pole position in the 293. Alongside him, Anthony Valorio, leveraging great balance of performance and good performance today in the number 41 Ferrari 488. He puts himself up and ahead of his contemporaries in the 296 from 4th and 7th, that being Marianelli and Bucossi. We'll get on to those in just a moment's time. Mr. Scallop starts on that second row right behind then the leading Porsche of Broscioli. Could leverage a very good start here to try and challenge for the race lead alongside Valorio and Broscioli down towards turn 1. And we also see, actually, hang on just a moment. Yes, we are missing a piece of the puzzle. Where is Dion Helgalian? We see now a disconnect has forced Helgelian to rejoin from the back. So that's why Valorio's up over the front row. It was a confusing story as to why the 45 wasn't there, and moreover why Valorio is starting what looks to be a bit of a stop back there, unless he is right towards the very front of what the grid can offer. More on that in a moment's time, though. Further down from 4th place, then 5th for Steven Sutton, Christianis Laniak 6th, Lorenzo Bicossi in 7th, and Antonis Kokomelakis in 8th, Radoslav Kavolchik in 9th, Luca Tamburini in 10th, and Armando Davoli in 11th. Onto the GT4 field with Przemak Zulim in pole position, then starts alongside Tom Wells, Division 2nd, Division 3rd for Timo Tosto, Division 4th for Gonzalez, Division 5th for De Munster, Division 6th for Gagliolo, and Division 7th for Cobbler. Stephen Black and Dion Helgelian to start from the back of today's field does make for a very bizarre twist in what has otherwise been a fantastic qualifying session on all fronts. Let's get on board, though, with the leading car, Bruchtuli. We can see, though, the gap has actually been made up, so Valorio will be starting alongside as if he has started from second on the field. The 45, though, if I'm not mistaken, was the original occupier of second place. So that is a very unfortunate time for him to have gone through a disconnect. Nonetheless, with an hour laying before us here, just to give an update to the current session itinerary. After a bit of a muddled run in towards qualifying with some technical difficulties, we're into the run of 60 minutes of racing. One mandatory pit stop for fuel and tyres here in Snetterton. Down towards turn 1 then. On the formation lap on board with the new driver on the field. The 293, a very last second sign up then. Marcelin Bruchtuli in the 293 Porsche. He's got ample competition there from the front and second row behind him. Valorio, Scallops and Marianelli. All drivers to have given him some variety of grief in the session so far. Namely that 51 we saw way earlier in the session. Or I should say in what was originally the running of qualifying before the server disconnect. It was actually an overtake from the 51. During that qualifying in towards turn 2. That did bring quite a bit of grief there to the 293. Second time's the charm, though, on that second run of qualifying. Down towards Agostini then. It's going to be an interesting scope of things here because the Ferrari 488, we don't have a lot of data to hand on what its race starts are like, especially up over the front row. So it's going to be curious to see how does Valorio tackle this challenge of trying to get an early advantage over the Porsche, knowing he'll be to the outside. He'll have to really play this very close to the chest. I think the best strategy at the moment is tucking in behind the Porsche and then trying to get the run necessary out through riches to challenge up the inside at Montreal. Even that, though, comes with a great degree of risk in the opening lap, and I don't imagine that we're going to get through the opening lap without even without even minor incidents underway. I think we are going to definitely see a lot more trouble this time around, and bear in mind that's trailing off the act of Bathurst the round before, a track that is almost purpose built with the idea to destroy cars in the midst of a race. It's going to make for a curious debut, though, here for Bruchtuli. You see at the moment then warming the tyres up on the 293. From behind him, the 41 and the 394. For Valorio, this does represent the chance to push back up into the podium positions of the championship. Fell out of that on the run out of Bathurst, in behind Steven Sutton to 4th in the championship in the GT3, so this does represent a great chance for him to push up and ahead. Moreover, with the championship lead for GT3 behind him, if he's able to hold on to a solid position in today's race, there's a great chance for Valorio to move into a championship challenging position by the end of the season at Spa 3 weeks away, as we do have a break week after today. In this championship, the 21st, there won't be anything on for HCCL by us here on TRTN. This championship will go on hiatus for a week, and we're back into the last 2 rounds starting from the 28th onwards. That's on the grounds. Everything goes swimmingly today. Of course, if you are still seeing this broadcast, that does mean that things did go well. Down towards the line then. An hour against the clock here in Snetterton. Round 6 of Season 3 of the HCCL Multiclass Championship. Starting from the front lines then on debut, Marcelin Bruchtuli with Anthony Valorio right alongside. 20 cars in all, 10 either side of it, 2 categories. Down to the line then, without further ado, for round 6 of the championship. We are green and racing here in Snetterton. A great getaway there by Marcelin Bruchtuli. We see also a great start from Mr. Scallops, immediately tucking into the fight then, right behind Anthony Valorio. Down through to turn one we go almost immediately. We saw in the background there was Christianis Laniacs taking up a bit of grass. A brilliant start then by Brostuli. The 41 tries it made, couldn't find any ground at that expected region down in Montreal. Looking further down the line then to take a look in with the GT4s. What was the scope of things for the race start between the leading pair? Bear in mind, looking up over the front, Wells gets a decent getaway then from Di Tosto. From behind them, you can see making his way through the field almost immediately there, up and around the outside of Dennis Gonzalez. Looking over the rear view from Timo Di Tosto's point of view, there is Dion Helgilian. In towards Agostini. That Mustang is going to have to carve through the GT4s before it can start to make up ground in its own division. Up towards Hamilton, we see here, forced to the outside. The 58 takes a bit of grass over the right-hand side, but this is great news at the moment for Tom Wells, who's had a bit of a buffer zone created by the presence of that 45. But bear in mind, he's next in the iron sights on his run out through Oggies in towards Williams. You see here, watching over the rear view onto the Bentley straight, descends upon him there like the plagues of Egypt, the 45, almost immediately up onto Tom Wells. We see that Armando Davoli dropped down out through Williams. We see the Lamborghini with damage on the run down towards, looking here, down towards Brundle and Nelson at this time. You see meanwhile as well, Przemak Zulim, who started from up on pole position, has had a nightmarish start here to drop in behind the two Mercedes cars towards the back of the top five. It's created this interesting zone now for Tom Wells, who had a brilliant start with Aston Martin. Not Aston Martin, sorry, with Ginetta. The Aston Martin, however, did not have the greatest of starts. You see those starting to take up the slack of it in a three-way fight at the moment for third in division. Matthias de Munster versus Dennis Gonzalez versus Przemak Zulim. Behind them, Stephen Black in the GT3 category. So a great start on both categories there. Quite a lot to be said in terms of action. Down towards Riches, we see Zulim going around the outside. Has to back out of it there off of the 69. The 91 trying to carry as much momentum necessary to continue the fight up past turn 2 at Montreal. Up ahead of them then, Tom Wells from Timo Di Tosto, Dennis Gonzalez, Matthias de Munster and Przemak Zulim to make the top 5 of GT4. Looking back up into GT3 for a moment here, Marcelin Brostuli breaks away from Mr. Scallops, who's now up and ahead of Anthony Valorio by 0.6 of a second. Stephen Sutton 4th and Lorenzo Bicossi in 5th. Christianis Laniacs in 6th place at this time. Close fighting, though, between these three for second place. Bear in mind, one slip from up ahead. Brostuli will find himself in the midst of a stampede of cars hunting him down for the leading position of this race. 1.6 seconds at this time between Brostuli and Scallops. Now with clean air in between the pair of them, Scallops has the opportunity to knuckle down and hunt down the 293. 56 minutes before the end of this race. It's the start he's been looking for here. Scallops started down on the second row, made quick work of that. From third now to second, has got clear line of sight over the race lead and is already gaining time. From what was 1.6 seconds through sector 3 has now dropped to 1.1 seconds. Has made half a second up there in remarkable stead. Now only a single second between Brostuli and Scallops. There is very likely then in the near future that chance for a fight of GT3's race lead. We'll catch on with them a little later on. We see here from the point of view of Stephen Sutton as Anthony Valorio breaks away. Lorenzo Bicossi looks to be closing in fast in that 32. There is definitely the chances here of a fight for 4th place. That's if anything doesn't occur up over in front of him here from the podium position, 2nd and 3rd. Looking further down the line then on the progress of Dion Helgilian, and now where we see him, he's now into the top 10 up and ahead of Radoslav Kowalczyk and Armando Duvoli. I want to point this one out. These two are currently fighting round Montreal. We see here Armando Duvoli fighting with Radoslav Kowalczyk in towards Palmer here at turn 3. The Porsche around the outside. Meanwhile, behind them, you can see there is Luca Tamburini. Lamborghini up the inside, Porsche to the outside. Porsche's got way better stopping power, so going the long distance here is Kowalczyk. Can he hope to hold on to position? Sadly runs himself just too much out of ground on the exit of Agostini into Hamilton. Duvoli looks to hold on to 10th place for the time being as they're running out wide. Goes Kowalczyk. Now rejoins right alongside Tamburini in towards Oggies. Tamburini runs out wide, then in towards Williams. A little bit of grass there on the left-hand side for Duvoli. That's going to upset the balance of the car just ever so slightly. This is all in that current stead for 10th place then between Duvoli, Kowalczyk and Tamburini. Down the Bentley straight we go. We'll get on with them in a moment's time. Looking in towards the GT4 field. Stephen Black makes close encounters here with Timo de Tosto now second in the GT4s after a lightning start from both McLaren and Ginetta to get up past Aston Martin. They find themselves out past Mercedes at the back of GT4's top 5. You see then Stephen Black in the car in front, that being the 707 Ferrari up the inside on Tom Wells, so dangerously close to chances of contact. Meanwhile, a big stab there of rebound on the suspension of the 58. Huge upset of balance for Timo de Tosto. The two Mercedes cars unfazed by it by comparison and now closing ground. Meanwhile, let's just get a quick look back in here. The 998 versus the 991. Devoli v Kowalczyk. Meanwhile, we see the 813 there. Swings across. Both Porsches onto the grass. That gives easy leeway over to Devoli in towards turn 2 at Montreal. Very bizarre stuff down in Sector 1 between these three at the back of the top 10. Tom Wells, 1.3 seconds in the clear here of GT4's race lead. He's been hunting down an opportunity for a race win as far back as Paul Ricard, where it really was well within his chances to fight for. We see out back here ongoing clashes for the podium position. Matthias de Munster still defends away from Dennis Gonzalez and Przemek Zulim. The Aston Martin and the Mercedes chasing down the 69 at this time on the exit of Palmer. Looking back up then to what's currently the situation over the front of the field. 1.1 now, 1 second, now 0.9 of a second between Nissan and Porsche. Brustoli v Scallops absolutely on the table here in the next couple of laps by the way things have been going at this time. Especially through Sector 3, the Nissan able to get its elbows out, able to get a lot more aggressive compared to the Porsche that has to take things a little bit easier on the run through Sector 3, able to knuckle down through Sectors 1 and 2. On the breakaway there from Murray's 1.2 seconds between Scallops and Brustoli. Definitely the chances there of an imminent fight. 998 in trouble. Yellow flags out. That's for Armando Devoli, who I believe very well is now out of this race. The 991 now takes up position over him, that being Radoslav Kowalczyk. That brings a very abrupt end to what was pretty solid fighting, all things considered, towards the back of the top 10. Now taking up 10th place is Luca Tamburini in the 813 on your screens at the moment, back into green flag conditions as he makes his way down the Senna straight. Behind him there, you can see Kowalczyk down in 11th place. Stephen Black now 12th. Rejoins the rest of the field. As I say that, though, looked to have been trouble, yes, indeed, for Stephen Black. So we've got to try and catch on board here with the 707. Trouble out through Murray's. You can see there significant damage on Stephen Black's Ferrari. Now as the GT4 field passes him up, he pulls to one side on the Senna straight here, waiting for the arrival of Gagliolo and the number 30. Pulls it to one side. That could very well be the end of the road here for Stephen Black. Catastrophic front end damage. He's back out on track though, so you've got to respect the hustle in order to get the car back on the track and to see the checkered flag in this race. Very early door trouble though for the 707. That could be a very early trip to the pit lanes. Seeing here a progressing fight then between the 91 and the 14. Meanwhile, the number 30 of Marco Gagliolo spins out on the exit of turn 2 at Montreal. 707 is now back into the pit lane. Monitoring the situation up at the front of the field, we do see that McLaren is gaining distance up onto Ginetta. So De Tosto stands upon the chances here to fight alongside Tom Wells. In the straightaways here on the Bentley straight and the Senna straight, this is where the Ginetta is at its most vulnerable, but every other section of the track, that G55, has got the bite to keep McLaren at bay. This could prove to be a very unique fight up over the front here. Tom Wells, we've seen him battle with giants before, namely battled with Vladislav Mizin all throughout Paul Ricard at round 4 in the pouring wet rain, and was still able to put ample challenge up to Mercedes. What is the scope of the challenge going to look like here from Timo de Tosto and McLaren? Only time will tell us different. We see from behind, still ongoing, is that three-way split for third in GT4. Matthias de Munster still defending away from Dennis Gonzalez and Przemek Zulim. It's Mercedes versus Aston Martin. So after the first 10 minutes, let's go to catch on board with the leading pair here, just to give us the current scope of the situation. So up towards the front of the GT3 field after 10 minutes of racing then. Brustoli leads Scallops, closing in from second. Sutton third now ahead of Bukossi. It looks like early troubles there for Anthony Valorio in the time since. Very curious case then. We see currently being attacked by Christianis Laniex. This is for 6th on the field. So, in the meantime then, Brustoli leads, Scallops second, Sutton third, Bukossi fourth, Marianelli fifth, Valorio sixth, Laniex seventh, Kokomelakis in 8th, Tamburini 9th, and Kowalczyk in 10th. Tom Wells leads the charge for GT4. We see at the moment, right behind him and closing in at a fast rate of knots, the 58 of Timo de Tosto. Matthias de Munster third in division with Dennis Gonzalez fourth, and then Przemek Zulim in 5th, Felix Kobler in division 6th, division 7th for Marco Gagliolo, but damages on the number 30. Meanwhile, Dion Helgalian took a very early pit stop in the opening quarter hour of this race. That was unless it was a case where his reconnect forced him not to take pit stops. I'm still a little confused on that one. As far as we know, the 45 did carve his way through the GT4 field, so I'm likely to believe the former theory where he has gone into the pits very early on to sort of recover from the early losses of this sudden setback. He was set to start second place, but a disconnect forced him to the back of the field. And he's had to make up for it ever since. Stephen Black currently in the pit lane, 2 laps down with severe damages on the 707. Meanwhile, in the scope of things up over the front, Brustoli breaks away from Mr. Scallops. There was the chances there for some time between these two to go head-to-head for the race lead. It may very well be a strategy game that brings them back into that equation, but at the moment it's 2.5 seconds between Nissan and Porsche up over the front of this field. Bear in mind, looking back through the previous race wins here, this could represent another unique challenge on the table here for the defense of the championship by Mr. Scallops. Bear in mind, one Season 2's GT3 wing in that Nissan GTR number 394, looking to go back-to-back with Nissan, has now been presented with, in the late stages of it here, past the halfway mark of the championship, with new challenges courtesy of Sutton and now Brustoli. In GT4, we are on the chances here to see Mercedes-AMG dethroned with their 100% win rate courtesy of wins between both Vladislav Mizin and Matthias de Munster over the course of this season, as right now Ginetta and McLaren are fighting for the lead. Speaking of, let's go to take a look on board here. Actually, before we do have trouble for the 41 down the Senna straight. So dropping now even further down position is Valorio, now out past Laniex. Kokomelakis gaining ground on the Senna straight. What on earth has been going on then for the 41? We see off in the background ahead of them there was Laniex annihilating the braking boards. Evidently, no one knows when to stop now at turn 2. Not a big fan of visual indicators, clearly, in the number 84. Out through Palmer we go. A curious case then. In spite of everything that has gone wrong so far, no indication, at least visually, what has gone on for the 41 damage-wise. It looks still factory new. You see here, continued advance by Aston Martin, but stifled all the same in the back of that top 5, held at arm's length there between himself, Gonzalez and de Munster. Approaching from behind, we see Dion Helgalian with his very early pit strategy, a unique one indeed. Let's get a look on board, though, with what's going on at the forefront of GT4 as Timo de Tosto is closing in ground over Tom Wells for the division lead. On board with the leading Ginetta then to get a look at the defending angle of what is currently a fight for division first. Overall, it's for 11th on the field, soon to be 10th with the arrival of Helgalian now carving his way up past the Aston Martin and the 2 Mercedes cars we just see in the background there. But our focal point is here on the fight of division lead for GT4. Bear in mind, last time we saw Tom Wells was over on TRC's coverage for round 2 of their championship over at the circuit Paul Ricard. And that time he was driving with Nissan. He's back behind the wheel of a car we know much more familiar to his driving style, the G55. And it's right at home here in Snetterton. Of course, mentioned earlier in the broadcast, this car has seen routine action here at Snetterton as one of the many venues on the Ginetta GT Championship calendar. Of course, this G55, before it made its way into SRO's GT4 category, used to be a single-make cup car. Hence why it's such a bizarrely put-together vehicle when put into comparison to other cars around it, like the road-ready McLaren 570S or the Mercedes AMG GT. We see there, Dion Helgelian carves up past, now into 11th place. But this is still the focus of a division fight for first. And with the Mustang sadly not having passed up the Ginetta down the straights, it means that he's not going to find any advantage in the getaway here down through the centre straight towards turn 1. He's totally at the mercy here of what those gears can give him out of the Ginetta. You can see reeling him in. He's got him on the line here. Timo de Tosto could very well look at the inside in towards Riches. Doesn't think of it just yet. Looks out past the apex of Riches for a next available opportunity out through turn 1. Bear in mind, the Ginetta's got some great stopping power here, a featherweight in division. We can see, though, maybe overcooking the brakes through turn 2. Now does invite in the opportunity for McLaren to come and strike here, getting closer and closer to their rear quarter, in towards Palmer, holding centre mass of the road, not giving him anywhere to squeeze in. Tom Wells having to get very, very defensive all of a sudden after the first 15 minutes of racing. Bear in mind, for the bulk of this grid, pit lane entries coming up in about 13 or so minutes on average. Drivers usually aiming for the 50-50 mark in the majority of these races with single pit stop runs. So do expect the bulk of that to come up at the 30-minute mark of today in about 13 minutes time. We do see as well, in the meantime of all of this, I would like to point out that getting closer and closer to this leading fight was previously a fight by its lonesome for third. We do see approaching from behind the two Mercedes cars of De Munster and Gonzalez. Down towards Brundle and Nelson. See, the Ginetta runs out onto the grass just ever so slightly there. That's not done too much damage for Tom Wells. In through turn 10, in towards turn 11 we go. Out through Murray's, 3/4 of a second now, and I think he's just got the slightly better exit. Into the pit lane goes Matthias de Munster in the number 69. It leaves Dennis Gonzalez out in third. Przemek Zulin pursuing from fourth, incredibly close at this time. We do see in the background the Aston Martin eyeing up its chances over the Mercedes, but no advance out through turn 1, so it does appear, as we continue to watch over the rear of the number 12 in the fight of GT4's lead. Now, just to get another quick glance over the back, just to see that up the inside, as expected, was Przemek Zulin, but that's much to the chagrin of Dennis Gonzalez, who had a bit of a quarter spin there through Montreal. So far, by comparison, not an awful lot going on up in GT3 at this time. Nearby fights between Laney X and Valorio. Also to be considered is Bucossi versus Marianelli, the two Ferraris head-to-head. But what we're focusing on here is down in the GT4 wing, a very close and developing fight. As we do see yellow flags came out for the 84, that's Christianis Laney X, and in comparison as well, another yellow flag for another Porsche, that being the 991 of Radosław Kowalczyk down at Murray's. Very confusing stuff indeed. Strange timing there between the two Porsches. Down the Bentley straight, though, this is where McLaren can just reel him back in. There's not an awful lot Tom Wells can do, but hold on and pray that De Tosto doesn't muster up the courage to jump up the inside. Down at Brundle, then into Nelson. Fortunately, this time around, he's been spared of that fate. But the 58 is looking hungry for position here. The run out through Bombhole Corner, in towards Coram. Bear in mind, the 293 and the 394, the two leading GT3s, are closing in on this fight very, very quickly. So two worlds are about to collide there. You can see in the background that faint white and red being the leading car at this time of Brustuli. You see Kowalczyk into the pit lanes at this time. Meanwhile, De Tosto trying to go around the outside at Riches. So nearly a point of contact there. The 58 had to avert. Very nearly an incident between the pair. That got hairy in the run towards turn 2. Meanwhile, up in front, Marco Gagliolo ran into trouble. We see Tom Wells runs out wide. Timo de Tosto tries to hunt from the inside, but lacks the momentum upon corner exit. In the meanwhile, we can see there, Marco Limbrostuli closing in at a fast rate of knots. We see up in front there, the wounded number 30. That Alpine's got to get shot of the situation here with the number 12 approaching very quickly now on the run in towards Agostini. Up the inside goes Wells on Gagliolo. That forces a bit of a wedge here for De Tosto as the 30 falls back in over the racing line for a moment there. That does create a bit of a buffer between him and that of De Tosto, and that's only further reinforced from the arrival of Marco Limbrostuli and Mr. Scallops. Tom Wells then served somewhat of a Deus Ex Machina here in Sector 1 and 2. Bear in mind, on the run through Williams, Brostuli trying to get up and around the Ginetta as quickly as possible, manages to find the space for it. Down the Bentley straight we go. Wells momentarily cleared of having to defend off Division first, as you see, having fallen way further down the line. Now into the iron sights as it stands right now of taking a look there. That's Przemek Zulim. And then running off wide goes the Aston, having to cut across Nelson. We see in the background that wounded Alpine is creating a sizable ripple effect on the GT3 field, trying to lap up through Sector 3. As we saw there, trouble briefly for Sutton and Marianelli trying to get up and around Gagliolo. We see here Sutton up on the inside of Zulim. Number 14 in trouble now as well. Back on board with our leading pair in GT4. The gap now resides at 2.6 seconds after the interference by GT3 there, unintentionally so, has created a much more healthy gap for Tom Wells in the controlled lead of GT4 at this time. Meanwhile, De Munster and Gonzalez both having pitted now with Mercedes, looking to hunt down Aston Martin, McLaren and Ginetta under strategy on today's race. Getting a look at it as we head towards that halfway mark. Let's get a look at the grid once again. We do see recent advances there in go Sutton and Villorio. So the 7 and the 41 both into the pit lane at this time. At this time as well, also just exiting the pit lane appears to be Stephen Black after a lengthy repair job on the 707. He's back out onto the field in the pit lane at this time. Undergoing repairs is Marco Gagliolo with Alpine. Leaving the pit lane there, we see Przemek Zulim with Aston Martin, now having come into the pits. Sadly, though, drops out position past De Munster. The question therein remains with Gonzalez heading down the Senna straight. The 91 emerges there. You can see in the background that bright green number 14 of Gonzalez just has to hang out behind him there. As at this time, Zulim rejoins Division 4, technically Division 5th. Up in front there, we see is the number 7 making his way around turn 2. I thought that was a bit more of a crisis there, but I think it was just the long exposure of the camera made it look like the car turned itself around and spun. But no, it was just the car taking a sharp turn far off in the distance. How the camera can play such tricks on you. See in the background, not in the background here, but getting onto the background now of Bukossi, as he gets up and around Wells, does create quite a bit of an incident there and forces him back into the iron sights of Timo de Tosto. Now, could there be the considerations with 6 minutes awry of the halfway mark of Wells coming into the pit lane here, having been shaken about by the GT3s, doesn't yet consider it, and neither does that of Timo de Tosto. Felix Kobler, still yet to have pitted on the GT4 field, currently takes up Division 3rd ahead of De Munster and Zulim. Nearest gap at this time is once again over the front of GT4. So back on board, we do just briefly see here being passed up by the 45 of Helgilian. Now on board once again with Tom Wells and Timo de Tosto. These two still clashing heads for control of GT4's lead. In towards Agostini we go then. Bear in mind, closing in on them as well. One of the GT3s having come into the pits earlier on today, Radoslav Kowalczyk with Porsche, the number 991, 2.5 seconds away as we head down towards Hamilton and now in towards Oggies and Williams. Meanwhile, we did have a momentary yellow flag. Actually, yes, no, let's go to catch on board with this, as it looks to be a developing situation here. The 91, that is Przemek Zulim, into the pit lane. And what's gone on here for the Aston Martin? He's back into the pits. There does appear to be some modicum of damage on the Vantage. Could that be the end of his race here? As he's come short of the pit box. Not entirely clear what's gone on for him at this time. It's been a frustrating one nonetheless over the course of this session thus far. Curious to know what's gone on there. We were on board with the lead of GT4. Something clearly wasn't right. We see into the pit lane comes Giacomo Marianelli with Ferrari. Number 51 into the pit lane at this time. 34 minutes left to go in this race. I will say, though, the gamble by Helguillian is starting to pay off here because he's into the top 10. He's fighting, as it stands, about a second and a half away from Anthony Valorio, but as you can see, is closing in over the 41. He knew he had the pace for it, and there was a point there where we could consider Helguillian definitely up towards the front of the field in terms of that run for pole position. That was snatched out of his hands by a server disconnect. We can see, having picked up the pieces of what looks like certain defeat, he has now fought his way to his own unique variety of triumphs here. Back up into the top 10 and within the chances here to fight for ninth place. Let's stay on board just for a moment with Helguillian. Down through to Coram. Currently scrapping then with Valorio for ninth on the field. Up in front of them, Matthias de Munster in GT4. The Ferrari tries to break away there through and past the Mercedes. The Mustang follows in close tow. Down the centre straight we go then. In towards Riches at turn 1. Slight difference in entry line there. Helguillian is slightly arced over to the right. So always looking up the inside here. Trying to size up the scope of a gap up the inside on the 41. You can also make the argument this is a bit of mind games as well from the 45. Trying to get inside the 41's head. Making him think that every corner is an opportunity to where he could be potentially dive bombs. Now, of course, we know differently to assume that Helguillian would ever attempt to move that dangerous. But it's all about the mind games in the long run because that plays long-lasting damage over other drivers. It's all about getting in their head, making them break before you do. See coming up on another GT4 here, Felix Kobler up in front of them in the number 28 through to Oggies and Williams. Good let past there by the 28. Bear in mind to give any updates from the front, the 293 still leads ahead of the 394. And as far as I think we know at this time, neither of them have pitted. Meanwhile, Helguillian has got the run here over Valorio. And you can see he's just moving past the Ferrari like he's standing still in towards Brundle. And immediately up to ninth place there. The Mustang really showing off there its straight line speed over the Ferrari. Out through turn 10. In towards Coram we go then. Antonis Korkamilakis and Christianis Lanieks both in the pit lane at this time. So that's 2 positions for the price of 1 for Giacomo Marianelli up to 5th place after his earlier pit stop today. The 51 back to the top 5. And let's get a look at things as we approach the halfway mark of this race. As we do stay on board here with Marianelli, he takes a bit of a trip onto the grass, doing his best impression of a rallycross car on his way in towards turn 2. That's going to be rather entertaining spectacle then for the car right behind him, being Stephen Sutton in 6th. But to get a scope of things so far then, Brustoli leads ahead of Mr. Scallops in 2nd, Lorenzo Bucossi in 3rd ahead of Luca Tamburini in 4th, Giacomo Marianelli we were just on board with there for 5th, Stephen Sutton in 6th, Dion Helguillian in 7th, Anthony Valorio 8th, Antonis Korkamilakis in 9th and Christianis Lanieks in 10th. Radoslav Kowalczyk makes 11th place then into the GT4s. We still see leading this charge is Tom Wells up over Timo de Tosto by quite the distance after Sector 1 just gone now. That gap presiding as we get the updates for it on the run down towards Brundle and Nelson of 8.6 seconds between the Ginetta and the McLaren. I do wonder what's gone on there for both of them at this time. We do see as well, into the pits goes Mr. Scallops and Lorenzo Bucossi, so that is an interesting one as well. Felix Kobler, 3rd place, Matthias de Munster 4th, Dennis Gonzalez in 5th with Przemek Zulem in 6th. Marco Gaioliolo still in the pit lane from Division 7th and currently 19th on the field. Then we see also at this time Division 12th, but overall 18th for Stephen Black. See there, scallops released. Brostoli's still in the lead of this race, so it's going to be curious to see how does he angle up and overcut in the 293 at this time. Now, especially considering the 394 has got open air here as it just emerges up over the nose of the 91 in towards turn 1 we go. Decent line of sight here, nothing too much to worry about. Meanwhile, as well, into the pit lane went Timo de Tosto, the 58, after a brilliant opening stint then. Comes into the pits reluctantly 8.6 seconds away from the leading Ginetta. This seems to be written in the stars with 29 minutes left to go then for Tom Wells to take home a victory here in Season 3. He's been hunting this one down, having to go toe-to-toe with the current championship leader Vladislav Mizin. In the absence of the number 2 today, but with the recent presence of the 58, it has not been a breezy drive for the number 12. It is one he has had to fight diligently for. As it stands, though, this is going to be a rather curious end to this race, especially considering that 12 has still yet to have taken a pit stop run. Meanwhile, the leading GT3, the 293, Marcelin Brostoli, into the pit lane with Porsche. A bit of a slow stop there for the 293, but he's in. And the 394 is currently on the run of the Bentley straight, so running in parallel to the pit straight on the Senna straight at this time. Bear in mind the scope of only, what, 5 corners here. Rundle, Nelson, Bomhole, Coram and Murray's before he's back on the same stretch of tarmac as the leading 293. Bear in mind, these pit stops can take up in the range of about 20 to 30 seconds. And then there's the scope of getting out of the pit lane. And now this is where things are stacked a little bit against the 293 because he has a slightly longer run of things down towards the line. He is off of the Jackson on his way out, but the 394 just rounds out of Murray's, is on the charge here, but I fear it's too late for him as now crossing over the pit limit lines. You can see the Nissan in the background, tucked in behind Stephen Black as Marcelin Brostoli rejoins the field still in the lead. A successful overcut from the 293. Meanwhile, in the scope of things here, Giacomo Marianelli and Stephen Sutton not long from going head-to-head here for the podium in GT3. Luca Tamburini into the pit lane to bring Bucossi up to the top 5 once again by looks of it. Actually, no, definitely not, as we see now recent updates show Valorio to fight with Helge. Can I point this one out as well? Dion Helge on a lightning comeback here. This has been remarkable from the 45. Was down and out on the exit of qualifying as he disconnected and sadly rejoined at the back of this field. Started 22nd and now to 5th. That is truly, truly remarkable stuff. Easy, easy pick for driver of the day. And I'd say that's just for the GT3 division. I think we do have to break some of these down into division rankings as well, as you're not far from seeing a potential scope here of what could very well... Oh, hang on, a tick here. In the time since, we have seen Tom Wells, after his pit stop run, to have dropped away from the race lead, now in behind Matthias de Munster. So has the chance here for Ginetta to usurp Mercedes as a winning manufacturer in GT4 just fizzled away in the background. So it does appear. Matthias de Munster into the lead, leveraging good strategy today. 4.5 seconds clear of Wells in second. And that is a worrying sign then for Tom Wells. His chances of a race win fizzled out under strategy for Ginetta today. They put on a valiant fight alongside McLaren, but Mercedes were playing 2 steps ahead. And the 69 now leads the charge. Matthias de Munster looking at career win number 2 here in this season. More on that a little later on, though, as we are starting to see the build-up to some major fights here. As we catch on board with Stephen Sutton, much as we saw earlier on for, I believe it was for Marianelli earlier on, was a case that he was taking a big wad of grass there out through turn 1. Much was the same story for Sutton. Marianelli then builds up a decent gap on the exit of Palmer. Caught between Marianelli and Sutton at this time is Felix Kobler with Mercedes AMG, currently division 5th. Behind them we see Stephen Black in the 707. Also nearby fight at this time, Helge versus Valorio. That's since dissipated out to 1.8 seconds, much as the same gap as we saw for Marianelli v Sutton on the exit of turn 3. just to point this out as well, 2.7 second margin as it stands right now between Scallops and Brustuli. Now, to take a look at the more fine details of it, to see if there is really an ebb and flow to all of this, looking in through Sector 3, through Brundle, into Nelson, 2.7, now 2.6 seconds. As we build back out towards turn 10, 2.5 seconds. So there is a positive gain here. But the problem is we saw this much earlier in the race and that fizzled out all to the same. Is it going to be the same story with 25 minutes left to go here in round 6 of the championship? That Scallops' chance to retake the lead of the race here and to get back in charge of things after missing out on the race win in round 5, is that liable to fizz away? 2.5 seconds it was on the run in through Coram. As we see the gap update, it's still 2.5 seconds down towards Riches. Faster in the last lap then by some way. We must consider as well, of course, Brustuli was out of the pits. 2.4 seconds at this time. Meanwhile, to point this out, Helgalian still in the top 5 here, slowly, by looks of it, gaining ground over Sutton, as Marianelli stays up and ahead. For Marianelli, this is a great return to form then for the number 51. Back onto the grid, has had a bit of an on and off appearance record in this season so far. I mean, taking a look back through the last couple of results for Giacomo Marianelli, he's dropped down to 8th in the championship. As taking a look through it, of the 3 attendances he did have in this championship, 2 of which were podiums, the other was a DNF. That came out of the last round in Bathurst. The other 2 were dropped results as he simply just didn't show up. He didn't sign into the race. He was a registered no-show. But of this part-time season we've seen thus far from Marianelli, there is some rhythm to it. It has either been a case of podium nothing, but I suppose in this recent case there was a bit of an upset to that rhythm when we had podium DNF and then we're back, well, nothing DNF, then podium. Well, it looks of it at the moment, as he is still fighting for 3rd. If he holds on to that within 23 minutes, it's back to business as usual. But it is curious to see, in what has been a part-time drive here, bar one exemption at Bathurst, Marianelli has had one of the most consistent drives of any driver on this grid. I'd say the one other driver to be up and ahead of them in that accolade, you'd have to drop down towards GT4 to have a look, and that would be from the likes of Vladislav Mizin, where you're seeing his worst result of the season was 5th. That was at round 3 in Indianapolis. Everywhere else has been race wins. You see here the progressing fight between Marianelli and Sutton. Bear in mind, if Sutton can get back onto 3rd here, it'll be back-to-back podiums after his win in Bathurst last weekend. See, picking up one of the bollards there through turn 3, quickly spit back out by the 51. No trouble there for Marianelli, but he's 0.6 of a second away from Sutton. You can see under the brakes there how much more confident Sutton is getting in the later stages of this race. That could prove to be quite the challenge then for Giacomo Marianelli. We'll catch on with these two in just a moment's time as we take another look through the field here to see what is going on up over its front. We see 3.1 now, 3 seconds between Wells and De Munster. The chances then for Ginetta to fight this one back still remain there, but it's going to take some serious change between now and the end of the race for there to be any chance of them being side by side. So back on board with the fight then going on currently for the podium. Meanwhile, just to quickly take a look in, now 2.7 seconds. Very finely curated 2.5 to 3 second split between Brustuli and Scallops. On board then with Stephen Sutton. I'm also delighted to say as well, in some recent progress in our conversations with HCCL, we are aware of the developments of a follow-up to this Season 4 of the Multiclass. Now, we're not of liberty to divulge dates or locations, but we do know that it is in the works and it will be happening later down the line. Current arrangements are for a full season's coverage like we've had here in Season 3 from us here on TRTN. That's all we can reveal at this time. Just know it is coming at some point this year. We do have the dates, but we're not saying. That's a secret. In terms of other leagues we collaborate with at this time, we did have the announcement not long ago already, the confirmed arrival of Season 3 of the Competizione Performance League GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series. I know quite a few drivers in this category have competed in that in the past. We do have some drivers visiting from that grid today. Timo de Tosto, one among them. We had confirmation of that arriving as well. That's already available for sign-ups over on SimGrid with a more clearly defined Pro and Am split now. It's going to be curious to see where that goes with new event formats creeping in for Season 3. Also full coverage coming from us here on TRTN further down the line. We see, though, hot off the trails of the conversation of what could be in the near future is what's in the present right now. The ongoing fight of third place very nearly was a move up the inside through Brundle there by Sutton. You see there in the straightaways, much as we've seen in fights in the past, Ferrari powerless to do anything up against Ford. We can see, though, caught in the dirty air, it does make Riches a lot more of an involved experience for the number 7, struggling for ounces of grip there, caught in on the dirty air of the Ferrari in front. Now, this isn't going to get much easier for either of these two. As you can see there, that's Gonzalez up in front, that bright fluorescent neon green 14, the AMG there of GT4. Fortunately, they've approached him at a very convenient portion of the track there down towards Agostini. Now on the run in towards Hamilton. To note as well, the gap now up I believe they're 3.2 seconds as it stands there between Brustuli and Scallops. In fact, that appears to have advanced out now to 3.8 seconds. The chances for that to have progressed even further. It does look to be the case that Marcelin Brustuli is on his chances here for a win on debut in the 293. Now, it's a pity as well because he was such a late entry into this lineup here, and because we've been rather busy, sadly, we don't actually have a graphic available for the 293, but on the grounds, he makes it into the next round. Coming up into the penultimate running of this championship, round 7 at the Nürburgring. We'll absolutely have one ready for him at that time. What a curious case indeed we've seen thus far in the run of things up in GT3. We're still watching here in the fight between Giacomo Marianelli and Steven Sutton. Ford versus Ferrari in control of the last of the podium positions as we head on to lap 23. 17.5 minutes left to go here in round 6. And when the drivers were maybe hoping for some moment of respite after the madness that was Bathurst, they have been met with anything but here in Snetterton, a deceptively tough track on any a calendar. One that, personally, from my point of view, and this is speaking as an individual, not as TRTN, it was a track I wasn't the hugest fan of, but actually watching the racing here shows everything else. Not a big fan of lapping this circuit, but when push comes to shove and you actually get to race on Snet, it's a different story entirely. A track very heavily involved in that opening sector keeps things nice and close for the run down the Bentley Straight, where things open up just a tad and the opportunities for overtaking re-emerge. That's not to say there aren't any on the run through here. Bear in mind the cars that race around here. We do see GT3s, of course, with the British GT Championship, but I imagine where most people would know the circuit for is from the British Touring Car Championship. Much smaller hatchbacks there from Hyundai, from Ford, and from Vauxhall, among several other manufacturers on the upcoming grid as well, with the re-emergence of Audi and Mercedes onto the grid there, courtesy of Power Maxed and Plato Racing. 2026 BTCC grid I am thoroughly looking forward to, with every hopes to go to a few of the races this year. Perhaps Snetterton might be one among them. Current plans, though, are definitely for Brands Hatch, Silverstone, Donington, and trying to get up towards Knock Hill later on this year, with every hopes that we can do that. It would be a lovely trip up to Scotland. Less on that, though, more on this. Sutton, 0.9 of a second from Marianelli. As we take a look here into the last 15 minutes of the grid, on board with this fight at this time, one of the closest on the field. Now, emerging fights as well could be Picossi v Velorio, a fight amongst the Ferraris for the third row, for sixth outright in this race. Also to take a look down with 1.5 seconds between De Munster and Wells. Currently with the intervention there of the 394 and the 293. There is a chance here, if he is held up, that De Munster could fall into the iron sights of Wells. And now we know when in the slipstream, the Ginetta is not too shabby whatsoever. Paul Ricard proved plenty enough to us in the fight between Wells and Mizin. So it's a case here, all Wells has to do is just get in range, and he's 1.4 seconds out. There is absolutely the chances before the end of this race for him to be within a shot of fighting for that division lead. But again, as mentioned before, it's going to take a lot to put him in that conversation. We see here Marinelli and Sutton making their way around De Tosto. They'll soon be in and amongst that fight up at the front of GT4. So we see there, momentarily held up. So that's going to force a bit of a wedge up over the fight between Marinelli and Sutton. Now, that's not De Tosto's fault. He's just wrong place, wrong time. Such is the case of any multi-class race. That will always be one of the most frustrating things for racing in the top category, is running into the GT4s. You know, could be worse. Could be a prototype running into a GT3. That often doesn't end well, so I'm told. Looking into some of the other fights then, we can see the scope of things there. Two generations of Ferrari midship going head-to-head here, the 488 and the 296. We did see a drop away there from one of the drivers, not sure as to who. I think, yes, actually, we've lost the Alpine of Gaioliolo and the 707 of Stephen Black in the time since, now down to only 17 cars on this field. Of the GT4s, only 6 of them remain, with De Munster in the lead. Wells, I want to point this out, is closing in. We can see there could be a hamper placed upon that with the introduction of the 51. Giacomo Marinelli just up the inside there on Tom Wells. Now, depending on when he encounters Matthias De Munster, there is a chance here for this fight to reignite between the leading GT4s. We see the 51 up the inside on the 69. And with the sudden approach there of the number 7, this could be a rather interesting scope of things here. The 69 caught into the dirty air. Sutton having already broken up and ahead of Wells. The gap between the leading GT4s just under 1.4 seconds, I should say, not 1.5. As you see there, actually this has proven to be a bit more of an awkward time for Sutton than it has been for De Munster. Now, just to point out as well, the gap obviously between Marinelli and Sutton has dissolved quite a ways, but one that has started to pick up is Picossi v Velorio. We did see momentarily that fight before we cut back in with the action in GT4. Picossi gaining ground less than a second at the last interval. Just to point out as well, that huge pack of Porsches towards the back of today's field, that being Antonis Korkamilakis currently 8th place, Christianis Lanieks in 9th, Luca Tamburini in 10th, Radoslav Kowalczyk in 11th. Leading that charge all to the same, another Porsche, Marcelin Brustuli. It's been a very curious drive by this one indeed. You see these bizarre breakout talent drives in these championships all the time in that third and fourth quarter, where you get these drivers come in right at the very end that take competition by storm. It makes you wonder, well, where have you been the whole season then? We saw that over in VSR with Fate Galaxy. We saw early doors sign of progress there, then a sudden break, and then in the last 4 rounds of that championship, it was back-to-back wins for that one. And it makes you wonder, well, where was this all season? And that's the same story here for Brustuli. It's going to make for an exciting 3 rounds with this one today and 2 more thereafter at the Nürburgring and the Circuit de Spa-Francorchamps. But it does make you wonder, how long did we have to go before this one caught up with this championship, before he found out what was going on here? It has been an exciting time to see new drivers on the field take competition by storm in the way we have seen from Brustuli. More on that in a moment's time, as we do see the culmination of being in the right place, the right time, and proper knuckle down grit here from the number 12, as he has now caught up to within half a second of Matthias De Munster. You can definitely make the argument there's been some assistance there from the passing GT3s, but it has still created the scene here for these two to fight by their lonesome. Approaching from behind, though, it's going to be a bit of a shortly lived lonesome with the arrival of the 41. There goes Anthony Valorio. You'll see him pass there on the left. You can see the difference on braking as well between GT4 and GT3. The Ginetta, one of the better cars under braking as well. And that was easily a whole half to nearly 3/4 of a car length's difference in terms of when they could slam down on the brakes in towards Brundle. Bukowski up the inside, so nearly created an incident there. A little too eager to get up on the inside of the number 12. It's a bit of a bump there. That forces Tom Wells onto the grass to cut through Coram. Rejoins the track. Because of his eagerness to get back up into that fight, Bukowski accidentally has silenced the chance of that fight for first. The gap now out at 2 seconds. Tom Wells will be livid with the state of affairs there. Getting a look on board, though, with the return of that fight between the two Ferraris. Scrolling around here to locate them. The 32 versus the 41. 0.6 of a second. Bukowski in pursuit. Valorio defending from 6th. Now, it's just something I'd like to point out, just as we were scrolling through. It's worth taking note of this. That gap was up far further than it was before. We're starting to see it shrink again. Now, I don't want to speak too early on this because every single time it has been a case where we've looked at this gap and then it started to grow greater. Christian LeBay in chat saying, Mizin not in P1. Mizin's not in this race at the moment. Didn't sign up for this one. I imagine preoccupied with the festivities of Valentine's Day. You see, though, the number 12, Tom Wells, picks up a drive-through penalty. Meanwhile, the 91 of Zermak Zulim is off track there at Nelson. Disaster amongst GT4's ranks then, as De Tosto has effectively been given early access to second place. 8.5 minutes into the checkered flag. While it was a bit of a troubled day to get the session underway after troubles during qualifying, and if you're viewing this far into the current broadcast, you'll not be seeing how that got to be the case. There was just quite a few disconnects we saw as well there. Problems for Lorenzo Bukowski. 7th now. Drops well behind that of Valorio, potentially into the iron sights if things continue the way they are into Kokimelakis' point of view. But Timo De Tosto, all he's got to do is keep things nice and clean now between now and the end of the race, as he is looking to pick up second place on debut. Of course, a driver we've seen plenty of over on the North American circuit, over in the GT4 Pro-Am Cup America Series by Competizione Performance League. Now makes his debut into this series here on the Multiclass Championship, though I do believe, memory does serve me correctly, we have seen De Tosto here on HCCL before over on the GT4 Challenge. The reason why I clarify the North American circuit as opposed to what, you know, HCCL is technically an American league, if I'm not mistaken, is because this is much more international by contrast to what we have over on Competizione Performance League. That is closer, in my books, to a regional. There's a lot of the drivers there coming in from North America. Of course, there are a few exemptions to that rule. You know, you have drivers coming in from Europe, drivers coming in from Oceania. But compared to a grid like this, where you've got drivers here, I mean, just to have a look through it, Rostuli, Canada, Scallops, technically registered as Sweden, Marianelli, Italy, Sutton, America, Helgelian, America, Valorio, America, Bukowski, Italy, Laniax, Latvia, Kokimelakis, Greece, Tamburini, Argentina, Kowalczyk, Poland. You know, it's a multinational affair. So looking into the last 6 minutes then, as things have drastically shifted in the balance of GT4 for Tom Wells, a day perhaps to forget then for the Ginetta with that drive-through penalty. Question therein remains, will he serve it on this lap by looks of it? Not this time around. I think he's just going to run this one right to the very bitter end, knowing what has to happen. With only one more lap to serve it, this will be the next one coming. So having a look then, with just about over 5 minutes before the end of this race, Brostuli leads ahead of Scallops in second, Marianelli third, Sutton fourth, Helgalian fifth, Valorio sixth, Bukossi in seventh, Laniax eighth, Kokomelakis in ninth, and Tamburini in 10th, Kowalczyk in 11th. Into the GT4s, Matthias de Munster gunning for his second win this season in the number 69. He leads ahead of Tom Wells in second, soon to be past third, as he has a drive-through penalty. Timo de Tosto soon to be up to second, currently third in the session. Gonzalez in fourth, Cobbler fifth, Zulim down to sixth. The day to forget then for Aston Martin, as it has been somewhat of a disaster. Just to note as well, the gap still carefully maintained between that 2.5 to 3 second margin. Scallops, he has been pushing that car. You can tell it's been a little bit more of a wiry run of things by comparison. The gap back down to 2.2 seconds. He is pushing, but the Porsche just has more in the tank, so it appears. And that leading car, Marcelin Brostuli, gunning for a win on debut here. 4.5 minutes or so to the line. Functionally, after that last lap just gone, looking at about 4 more laps before the end of this race. Currently only 2.1 seconds. Question is, if his tyres start to falter even by a single degree, could that be the straw that breaks the camel's back and invites in Nissan in the last couple of laps here to come and fight with Porsche for the race win? Now, bear in mind how that would choose to affect the current win record by Mr. Scallops. This would be gunning on to race win number 4 this season alone. The other 2 wins of the season so far up in GT3 being acclaimed by Dion Helgalian and Stephen Sutton. Only 2 manufacturers then in all of GT3 so far this season have claimed a race win, that being Nissan and Ford. Porsche stand upon the precipice to interrupt that and become part of the growing Big 3. Wells into the pit lane at this time as well, waves goodbye to his chances of second place in today's race. As he gets out of the pit lane there, Gonzalez is a corner away, so he will hold on to a podium at the end of all things today. But a bittersweet feeling nonetheless for Ginetta. Fire Racing joining us in chat saying, hi, see you on Monza. Of course, later on today, that's what he's referring to, the 6 hours of Monza coming up in the NLRL Console Endurance Series. That comes up at about 6 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time, only a few hours from now after the delays from today. So we'll be getting swiftly into preparations for that event just as we wrap up here on HCCL. Coming up later on this weekend, of course, up on Sunday, 6:30 p.m. GMT, as the NLRL Sunday League will be coming to you live from Laguna Seca in Monterey County, California for round 2 of the championship. Reeling from what was an exciting opening round at round 1 in Suzuka. Gave us Cas van Veltsen's 4th career win in an exciting yet controversial opener to Season 5. Two and a half minutes left to go. That gap is starting to wither here. 2 seconds only remain between Brostuli and Scallops. One mistake from the leading Porsche is inviting in the Nissan to come and have a go. Meanwhile, yellow flags were out through towards Coram. That's for the 84 of Christianis Laniac. So we'll go to try and catch on board here. Rejoining the track into green flag conditions then goes Laniac. Minimal damages there, but definitely looking a little bit ropey towards the end of this race. Bear in mind, next lap coming will be the last of this race. So has it been a case where both of these drivers have been holding off, giving maybe about 95% per lap in for one last push here? As we see they're sliding out through turn 10 in towards Coram. The 293 still in the lead of this race. You can see really giving it the hammer now into the final lap, giving it absolutely everything the car dare give him. Is he flying too close to the sun, such as the story of Icarus for Marcelin Brostuli? Well, let's find out. Down towards the line then, onto the final lap. 1.7 seconds between the leading pair as the gap continues to progress in favour of Nissan. 1.6 seconds down towards turn 1. In that last lap was 2 tenths faster though, so Brostuli clearly with a point to prove here. Stands upon the chances of giving Porsche their first win this season in Season 3 of the HCCL Multiclass. Moreover, joins the ranks of race-winning drivers and does so upon debut. Joins up, though, through turn 3 at Palma, just over the rear end of Dennis Gonzalez. Down towards turn 4, Agostini. Very aggressive line on entry there by the 293. He's now having to really compensate for the lack of grip over the rear of the car. In towards Hamilton. Bear in mind for Brustoli, this is all on the line now. One mistake and it's over. In through Oggies with the Nissan just behind him. That momentary buffer created by Gonzalez has brought the gap back up to 2.3 seconds, so he can breathe a little bit here on the run down the Bentley straight. Bear in mind for GT4, it is looking to be in the bag here for the 69 at this time. The 58 not too far away, so he can't relax just a little too early here in this event. Heading down towards the line then, sadly with no placard to show for this one, but we'll be sure to make one for the next round. Such a surprise as it was to see him enter the grid as late on into the running towards round 6 as it was. Round towards Coram. Porsche do stand upon the chances here of successes in Season 3 and heralding its arrival, the 293, Marc-Hélène Brustoli down towards the line then on a sensational breakout performance, a win on debut. The checkered flag flies here in Snetterton. Marc-Hélène Brustoli wins in GT3. A brilliant, brilliant drive, one definitely to remember in this season by the 293. Fantastic performance on debut. Mr. Scallops in second. Giacomo Marianelli back onto the podium. The 51 to the checkered flag. Third place. Stephen Sutton to fourth. Dion Helgelian fights it back to the checkered flag. Fifth place from the back. Brilliant turnaround for the 45. Valorio coming to the line ahead of Bukossi in sixth. Meanwhile, in the scope of things for GT4, we'll be getting on with that of Matthias de Munster in just a moment's time. To the line then, Bukossi on the exit of Murray's. Seventh place then for Bukossi. Antonis Kokomilakis looking at the scope of currently 8th place. We'll have to wait for the full result to reel in, but make no mistake of it. You're about to see here on the run down towards the line. Of course, the race winner for GT3, Marc-Hélène Brustoli. We'll wait to show that graphic up again, though. Back on board here with the fighting up at the forefront of GT4. Matthias de Munster making his way down through Murray's for the last time today then, has fought diligently to put himself back onto the top level of the podium. Down towards the line he goes then. It's race win number 2 for the number 69. Mercedes maintain their tie of a 100% win record in GT4. Matthias de Munster wins in Snetterton. Timo de Tosto on debut, second place for McLaren in this championship. Tom Wells in third, reluctantly so, on what could have been his first race win of the season. Came apart under strategy, and that drive-through penalty did little to help things for him there. We see the full results roll in, and let's get a look at them. Your 2 division winners then, Marc-Hélène Brustoli and Matthias de Munster in GT3 and GT4. Mr. Scallops in second, with Giacomo Marianelli in third. Stephen Sutton in fourth, Dion Helgeli in fifth, Anthony Valorio sixth, Lorenzo Bukossi in 7th, Antonis Kokomilakis in 8th, Christianis Laniaks in 9th, Luca Tamburini in 10th, Radoslav Kowalczyk in 11th. Into the GT4s, Matthias de Munster wins in the number 69 Mercedes. Timo de Tosto 2nd, Tom Wells 3rd, Dennis Gonzalez 4th, Shemak Zulim in 5th, and Felix Kobler in 6th. DNFs from Stephen Black, Marco Gagliolo, Armando Duvoli, and Oliver Swaber. Well, an exciting round here in Round 6 of the HCCL Multiclass Championship Season 3. That's all from us here on TRTM. We've got to get swiftly underway with the preparations for the 6 hours of Monza later on today. Don't wait around. We'll be here at 6 o'clock Greenwich Mean Time. Until then, that's all from us. Take care.